Hi.
Hi. Good morning. Kathy Lynch, representing the National Shooting Sports Foundation.
Hi, Kathy.
Good morning. I just wanted to, I've got an article being passed around. I just wanted to keep the lead issue at the center of your agenda. It obviously has a huge impact economically on the state of California and certainly on hunters and this commission's funding. I just want to keep you informed of what other states and countries are doing. Austria recently abandoned its approach to pursue a lead ban. They do not believe that the science is adequate. It has poor performance. The alternative hasn't been studied enough. There's not calibers available, and it's only 2% of the total environment. In addition, I wanted to draw your attention to the San Diego Union article about the opening of dove season and some of the problems and the confusion that came out. There were hunters that have been doing this for 35 years that were unable to do it this year because of confusion and non-availability of ammunition. And I would remind this commission and the department that there's a responsibility for you to do an annual update to have a list available. And I would request that this commission ask that the director and the department put forth some formal protocol on how they're going to statutorily review the non-availability of ammunition. I know that's something when the department supported the lead ban that they put in the bill, and yet it's not part of the regulations, and there's really just, it's a radio silent conversation. So I think the public deserves to know what the triggers are going to be and what the criteria is going to be for the exception to the lead ban.
Ms.
So
Lynch,
thank you.
the triggers on what? The triggers on the availability of lead?
Of the calibers of non-lead, if it's readily available, cost and availability was a big part of the statute, and that's
Right.
why the director had that authority, but it didn't really get put into regulations even though we requested it. And now that you have an annual responsibility to sort of post that, I think it's only appropriate that you ask the director to put forth something that the public can understand is going to be the triggering mechanisms.
So I certainly agree with the first part of your statement that we want to proceed in a diligent fashion. I think the department's done that. We don't want to rush to things. We also have been very clear, and the department's been very clear on the bumpiness as going through this significant change to hunters. I think they've been very often. I think Dr. Loft has talked about the inability for some of the calibers to get there. So I think they've done a good job this year. You're talking about moving forward, continuing to provide information regarding the commercial products available?
Yes, I mean, I think there's statutory responsibility as well as regulatory responsibility. I think that the commission has a responsibility, Sanki can correct me if I'm wrong, to annually look at and have a list available for the public. And I think the department statutorily has an obligation to make a determination on when it's not readily available. And I think also, as you're going into your phase up, as you call it, that you need to review what hasn't already worked. And so this dove season was a problem already. And so it would be good to bring that forward here at this commission and have an open conversation about what went right and what went wrong.
Okay, good. I think the department has made it very clear that some calibers will not be available. Correct? Chuck, do you want to jump in here?
I do. Starting at the end and moving back to the beginning, thank you for the input, Ms. Lynch. I'm aware of Ed Zarowski's letter. I'm also aware that after talking to our outreach and education folks and Chief Bess, that broadly speaking, our sense in the field is folks are complying with the law in the limited first phase step that's happened this year. There probably was confusion within the dove opener in places, but not systemically across the whole endeavor. But I think it would be appropriate for the department to understand how this first step went, come back and have a conversation with the commission about how we learn from that in preparation for the next step of phase in next year. My next thought is, I think, but I would want to check that Ms. Lynch is probably correct. The commission maintains kind of a list of certified, if you will. I don't think I'm using the right technical term. Non-lead alternatives. I'm not personally aware of the last time we've kind of looked at that or updated it, so I'll talk to Sankey. Lastly, I do think with regards to the statutory interpretation that's being offered, I disagree. We discussed this out ad nauseum in the rulemaking in front of the commission, and the way I read the statute is the trigger is very clear if the federal government, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms within the United States Department of Justice makes a decision on its end that prohibits ammunition, then the director of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is required to suspend the state ban. That does not leave room for the state director to have any discretion. The state director's action is contingent solely on the federal agency's determination.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Ms. Lynch.
Thank you, and thank you, Director Bonham, for that clarification on the record.
Sankey, you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of fill in some of the gaps in the conversation. Chuck did a very good job reviewing it, but as a reminder, your commitment when you adopted the lead ban was to monitor the availability and how the industry is stepping up. There was no regulatory requirement, but you made an obligation that if it appeared we were walking into a situation, you would rethink it, but there was no obligation regulatorily to do so, just to clarify. And the department is graciously taking applications to certify bullets, and they're posting those fairly regularly on the internet, on the department's website. So it is an active list. It's constantly being added to. So if anybody's interested, there is a process. The issue of how, the mechanism of how we approve that, we'll probably be talking more about that, because it was originally built when the Condor area ban went in effect, and we may want to re-look at and see if we need to re-engineer some of that process. But right now it's working from what I understand. I haven't seen a whole lot, and it sounds like Eric wants to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you,
Dr. Loft.
Thank you, President Baelish. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, too, because there has been some question about the certification list that folks have contacted us and said, hey, it has not been updated since 2012. And that's not true. It gets updated. I just submitted one for Dan's signature yesterday, a new one. When the manufacturers submit their requests for certification through the process that you adopted and turned over to the department, we do it within, I think, 30 days. And bullets that had been certified in the past are still on there. They may have been certified in 2012. They're still on the list, and it still is the form from 2012 going back to 2008 or 9. So really what we're looking for is for the manufacturers to certify. And I would also just add to Chuck's thing on the confusion. There was a bit of confusion, and we own up to some of that in the department, and that as it related to the Dove opener, and had worked with Mike Stefanik, the assistant chief down here in Southern California on this, but in advance of the Dove opener, that our statements on the web said closed or illegal to use non-lead on CDFW lands, and that was incorrect. That was a broad generalization. It should have been specifically CDFW wildlife areas and ecological reserves, and that led to confusion down here in the South. That's part of what's in here. Just one a flyer that those are some lands that we participate in, but they aren't ecological reserves or wildlife areas, and they could use lead on those areas.
Yeah, just like we've said before, it's going to be bumpy. This significant a change to the hunting community is going to be bumpy, and I think the department continues to do a good job at moving forward. So any other comments from the other? Jim, you want to? Any more public comments, Mary? Oh, we're done.